There is very little evidence at the moment of any constructive and positive impact of AADHAAR in welfare programs, whether it's the public distribution system, whether it's the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, whether it's things like pension programs. And I think what has actually happened, I mean, the rhetoric, as you pointed out, it was that AADHAAR was going to be a solution to eradicate corruption from these programs. But what was actually happening, I feel, based on certainly my experience in Jharkhand, is that these welfare programs were actually used as a way of pushing people towards enrollment centers, because they were told कि आधार नहीं होगा तो आपको काम नहीं मिलेगा, राशन नहीं मिलेगा, pension नहीं मिलेगा. So obviously people rushed to enrollment centers. And it's still happening today. I mean, the reason why AADHAAR has been made mandatory for midday meals, I think, is basically because now the main residual pool of people who are not enrolled are children. And so we have to find ways of making sure that the children get enrolled. So I think that more than AADHAAR helping welfare programs, it's the welfare programs that have helped AADHAAR. Now, if you look for evidence of positive impact of AADHAAR on welfare programs, as of now, I'm afraid there's very little to show. And on the contrary, there's a lot of evidence of damage. I can give a couple of examples if you like. One that I have studied quite a lot is the impact of AADHAAR on the public distribution system in Jharkhand. It's actually a little more than AADHAAR. It's AADHAAR and compulsory biometric authentication. So basically in Jharkhand now, in about 80% of the ration shops, you cannot get your food unless you authenticate yourself biometrically with AADHAAR. And if you're not able to authenticate yourself, that's it. There's a limited fallback facility called the one-time password system, OTP, which some people are able to use, but mostly people don't use it. And the consequence of that is that many people have been effectively excluded from the system, maybe something like 10 to 20%, which may not sound like a large number, but it translates into more than 1 million people not being able to buy their food rations anymore, including a lot of people who are on the margin of subsistence in the first place. And I think that is why we have recently heard these stories of starvation, some of which I have investigated myself. And I think there's no doubt that there has been a resurgence of food insecurity because of this biometric system. So the biometric part I'm really quite opposed to, because firstly, it creates a lot of exclusion. Secondly, it creates a lot of hassles, even for those who are still able to use that system, because sometimes the machine doesn't work, sometimes there's no connectivity, sometimes the AADHAAR number has not been seeded. So there are all kinds of ways in which it can create inconvenience and waste of time for people, even if they are ultimately able to buy their food rations. And then the worst part is that it has had no impact on corruption. In fact, if anything, it has led to a revival of corruption, because the main source of corruption in the public distribution system in Jharkhand is not identity fraud, like a bogus ration card or a duplicate ration card, where AADHAAR could conceivably help. The main source of fraud is what we call quantity fraud, where the local dealer basically gives people a little less than they should be getting. Like if you have an Antyodaya ration card, then you're entitled to 35 kilos of rice per month, and instead of that I give you 32, and I will authenticate you. Now the authentication doesn't help you to avoid that fraud. I mean, it's basically the power of the dealer to tell you that, you take it or leave it. So the biometric system doesn't help to address the main form of fraud, and it seems to have also led to new forms of fraud, at least for the time being, mainly because what happens is that at the end of each month, the rice that has been sent down the line for the people who are not able to authenticate themselves gets left over. And the government of Jharkhand has, to this day, made no effort, or at least no successful effort, to recover these leftovers. So there's a huge accumulated closing balance with the dealers, which almost certainly has been siphoned off in most cases. So basically, no impact, or if anything, a negative impact on corruption, huge exclusion problems, huge inconvenience. So I'm really not in favor of that. I think that's the clearest case where AADHAAR has not helped at all. And then there are cases where, for example, let's say the Social Security pension programs, where it doesn't seem to have made a lot of difference, because in any case, people are paid through bank accounts. And in the banking system, I don't think there's a huge issue of identity fraud, at least when it comes to payments like that. Like 200 rupees a month you're sending to widows and elderly people. We have not found much evidence at all of significant identity fraud in these programs. So then it's a case where it really doesn't make much difference either way. So basically, I don't really see much of a role of AADHAAR in these welfare programs. And on the other hand, I have larger concerns about civil liberties and the effect it might have on stifling dissent and building an infrastructure of surveillance. And that's where I feel quite opposed to the program, at least in this present form.